Welcome to Beyond the Box. Today on the interview, we have David Clapsadl. He is an attorney with Sterling Law here local in Raleigh, and he had such a wealth of knowledge. We talk about things investors should think about and listing agents should think about as well when it comes to what kind of permit should we be looking for these renovations. If a property has been renovated, what kind of permit should we be looking for that the closing attorney from the buyer side will look at? And the differences between what is going on inside of existing and new construction in the Triangle area specifically, but also across the nation. All these tips make you better and make us all better as an industry. So let's go on for the journey. I'm so grateful that you came be on the podcast today. Really chill vibe. Really, we just want to help people be better in the craft. We know the associations that both of us participate in really help realtors be better. And we want to see if we can help make everybody, all the professions better as well through just conversations with experts like you on the attorney side. And so really, I just want to get in to see like, how are things going in the law side of things? What are some crazy things you're seeing?
Well, I think what we're actually seeing is kind of more of a return back to a more balanced market. Particularly for a few years there, it was a seller's market and they had kind of all the leverage. We're seeing now, as homes sit longer on the market, we're seeing more concessions from the seller. So whether it's price reduction, whether it's seller concession, some of the due diligence amounts that we were seeing a few years ago, those have largely subsided.
You mean we're not at 50K for due diligence anymore?
We're not at 50,000 for due diligence anymore. We actually saw some that were even higher than that. And, it's one of those things where you got somebody who's looking at putting $100,000 down on a $300,000 house for due diligence. I'm going, well, you're buying the house at this point. I don't think you're walking away from that. But we are seeing kind of a return to a more balanced market. In terms of some of the crazier things that we're seeing here, we're seeing issues, I think, at times with permits not being pulled on some houses that are flips and things of that nature. And I know that's something that if you're a realtor looking at a house that's being done by a flip, the lender may have some restrictions. They may have seasoning periods and that sort of stuff that they want to look at. But the other thing too is to look at what work has been done here. This is something that's been recently remodeled. Is it something that's cosmetic? Did they go in and throw some paint on it, or have they structurally changed the house? Have they redone the electrical, or have they moved plumbing around? What's going on? And making sure that permits are being pulled, and that again, if there's any seasoning requirements from the lender side of it, it's being met.
So would you say that through the COVID period, when people could pull a lot more money out, they were doing the renovations to their house, but not necessarily the correct way? And is that one of the issues, or is it more of like the investors that are doing your flips?
I think it's more in the investors doing the fix and flips. Okay. For the ones that were doing the home remodels during COVID, usually those projects were small. So, they were going in and they were adding a built-in or something like that. And depending on the quality of work, you could tell or not tell if it's something that had been done in-house. And it's usually, if it's something small like that, it's not something that requires a permit or anything else like that. Whereas if you're getting into, again, if you're knocking down a wall and you're changing a load-bearing structure, you're going to have some, the county or the city come out and inspect it, make sure that it's properly done. So it's been more on the investor side where we've seen some of these pop up and have been issues. Ultimately, I think for realtors that are looking at houses that are have had recent work done, who's done the work? Are they reputable? Are they licensed? Making sure that they're paying everybody that needs to be paid. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to get to right towards the end of closing, near closing, and now all of a sudden we're finding out, oh, well, they did $100,000 worth of work to the property and there was never a lien agent appointed or anything else like that. And now we're having to kind of go back through and figure out what's going on with this property.
Are you seeing mechanics liens from these GCs that are being out there frequently enough? I just haven't heard of any, so I'm just curious, is it something that you're actually seeing?
Usually your licensed GCs will appoint a mechanics lien agent if there's anyone that's on there. If they're doing most of the work in-house themselves, there's usually nobody that's on that list. The more dangerous situation is whenever we get to someone who is maybe not a general contractor, that is they're the owner of the house and they're subbing out all this work to different parties. And in the aggregate, they're doing $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 worth of work, but each sub that they're hiring out is doing $5,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 worth of work. And now whenever they get close to closing, they tell us, well, I had all these different people that came and did work and we're asking the questions, and we're going, okay, we're within a day or two of closing, and now we have to go run down all these subcontractors that you hired and we didn't know about, and we got to make sure that they were paid and they've signed lien waivers and things of that nature so they don't come back against the property. And so it's one of those things of if you're doing that type of work, making sure that if you're an investor that's holding the property, so work with the closing attorney to just collect those waivers. They got paid, get a waiver from them, and it's something that you can just keep on hand so that whenever the closing attorney comes up and says, hey, who are all these subs? You can go, oh, here's lien waivers from all of them.
So I guess that comes back to the global panel that you and I were sitting on was preparation is key.
Preparation is key.
And especially for any agent that walks into a house and be like, I think work was done from the listing agent side, because there's a good chance the buyer's agent or the buyer are going to ask questions.
Correct.
Like, hey, or the buyer's agent's attorney is going to ask questions when they're doing title work of, hey, what about this? What about this? What about this? So the listing agent could be prepared.
Correct.
Well ahead in advance, like, hey, what have you done over the last 3, 5, 10 years? How did you do it? Was it one GC? Was it a bunch of people? Just so they have answers beforehand. Like you said, we're not sitting at the end like, we just found out.
And what was the total amount? Did you hire 10 different people to do $10,000 worth of work? Well, none of it was more than $40,000, but $40,000 is the cutoff that we're typically looking for a mechanics lien agent to have been appointed. So once the mechanics lien agent is appointed, there's actually a public website, liensnc.com, where you can get a login, you can do a search for a property, and if there are what we call potential lien claims, we can find those as part of our title examination. The scary ones are the ones where there's never been a mechanics lien agent appointed, and we're just relying upon the seller to tell us who did work on the property. And so we're having to kind of recreate, okay, who did the work, when did they do it, and making sure, like I said, they've been paid. So if you're a listing agent and you've got someone who's doing fix and flips, start with them early on and say, hey, let's put a team together for you. You want to sell this property, but let's make sure we're doing this properly, because the closing attorney is going to ask these questions, or they should be asking these questions. And so let's not have any last minute things that pop up that potentially could delay closing. Let's make sure we're ahead of the game.
That's so great. And that's what I like about this conversational format. I would have never known to even ask these questions, to figure out what is going on, and to know that mechanics liens or renovation, I love the renovation loan. Now, when we do a renovation loan from the lending side, we're making sure there's a GC, we're making it done right, or else we're not making any payments. But for the listing agents that are out there listening, hey, this is a way for you to get ahead of this, especially if you are like an investor-centric seller's agent or listing agent, where like you have a bunch of investors that are doing a bunch of work, and then you're the person that's selling all those houses, making sure that you do know what was going on or what has happened, so that the process is smooth. That preparation is key concept. One thing I am curious about, you said that we're getting back to normal or closer to what we had pre-COVID. How is new construction comparing to like existing? I feel like we have more new construction now than we did pre-COVID. What are those transactions like and their differences for you guys?
So new construction is still largely driving the market. It is one of those things that from a macroeconomics standpoint, you look at it and you go from the time that the market fell out, you bottomed out around 09, 010, somewhere in that neighborhood. So about 2019, North Carolina as a whole underbuilt. And so we had this kind of lull in construction, and then you had a perfect storm happen right around the time of COVID, where the real estate market was heating up. The interest rates were pretty low as it was. And then interest rates bottomed out, and everybody hit the market and said, now's the time to buy. I want to buy. And there wasn't enough inventory because we had simply underbuilt for 10 years. New construction has picked up the pace, and they have definitely tried to fill in that void to the extent possible. And a lot of people like new construction. I think we're seeing a shift for the builders who were 5 years ago could build a much bigger house at the price point. Now, with the cost of materials, with interest rates being what they are, they're building, a lot of them are building slightly smaller houses that are kind of those first-time home buyers in particular, if that's what they're geared towards. Of course, you still have the custom guys. The builders, in terms of their closing process, is different for realtors, simply because the builders a lot of times will use their own contracts. And so you don't see some of the same things that you see in the standard Form 2T contract that realtors use. And so they'll have, instead of like a due diligence or something like that, what you're putting down is a deposit that's non-refundable. And, being engaged with the process, the client goes under contract for new construction, you can't disappear. They need an advocate because they're navigating this process. And so it's something that if you've not done new construction before, make sure you've got a a real estate agent in your office that you're partnering with that can help guide you through the process.
Especially if it's at the beginning, right? Where it's like it's
beginning.
lot selection and going through it. You want to make sure like is framing done well. I've had an agent tell me that they were buying a home, and I'm not going to mention the builder's name, but it was a 2-car garage. And when they went to measure it at framing, they realized the slab was like 1.5 car. And they had actually shorted them. And I don't know what the difference is, like 5 feet or something like that in the garage. And they're like, hey, what happened? Now there was really nothing they could do, but at least they could go back to the buyer and be like, hey, this is something that happened. And having an agent to know to even look for those things instead of just, yep, frames check.
And making sure that the agent's, taking advantage of, you want a pre-drywall inspection. You want those inspections throughout the process. And it's not to say that the builders are out there trying to be shady or anything else like that. I think most builders are out there trying to provide a high quality product for their client at the price point. But I do think it is something that, in terms of making sure that this is the single largest purchase you're ever going to make,
right,
making sure that it's done right is extremely important. And so you're making sure those inspections get done, setting proper expectations for your clients so that they understand of there are many factors that go into new construction, one of them being weather and things that are outside of their control. One of the issues that we ran into, particularly during COVID, was delays in being able to close. And a large part of that was the ability for builders to get materials in. But you could have, if you have a month where it's rainy on, they can't get out there and pour the foundation or anything else like that, it could cause significant delays in your closing. And so you don't want to set expectations for your client of, oh, you're going to close on this date and you're 6 months out, because so much could go on in between now and then. And so you want to make sure that those expectations for the client are met, because you want the experience for them to be a positive one. You want them to walk away from the close and go, this was a great experience. If I have to sell my house, I want to come back to this realtor because they were so good during this process. And so it's something that just to be cognizant of, to make sure those expectations are properly set.
I think those expectations are really important for the lender side too, is because we're looking at rate locks. And yes, we can do a 30, 60, 90, 180 day rate lock, which right now with where the market is moving, we try to stay away from anything really above 30 because there's a high likelihood of rates coming down in 30 days. Or until you hit that 30-day period. But if you set it too early, then we're looking at extensions on rate locks and stuff like that. And so having that full kind of team collaboration of this is what expectations look like, however you might want to add on 10 to 15 days, or we 100% know that it's going to be close to this because all we have left is landscaping. And then we can figure out, when do we order the appraisal? Are we going to need a final inspection? When can we go about it? Because you're right. I've had a builder that just couldn't close it because he couldn't pour the driveway because it just rained and rained and rained, and they couldn't get the concrete there because it wouldn't set. And those are big issues for new construction.
It's, in terms of the kind of the new construction side of it is there's so many variables going in. And it's really cool to be able to design your own house and to pick out the finishes and all that sort of stuff if you're doing this from the ground up. But it's also stressful. So whether you're a lender or a realtor, you may play mediator a little bit some in terms of, okay, this is what you want, but this is what you need, sort of thing. But again, that's part of the setting the expectations. Because sometimes people come in and it's, they don't necessarily understand that. Or what are you getting for what you're paying, sort of thing, and making sure that they're staying within their budgets. That can be a very hard thing whenever and that's why, lender or builders have change orders and that sort of stuff. They want to kind of have a no fixed cost sort of thing of what they're dealing with. Whereas sometimes people will start the build process and it's like, well, I want to make this change or that change, and being able to have that conversation with them of, okay, if you make these changes, these are the changes in costs. This is what could be the delay in closing. This could be all these different factors that go into it. So again, experience dealing with new construction, I think, is important. And like I said, if you don't have that much experience, make sure you've got resources where, you've got a trusted partner in your lender who can walk you through the process. You got somebody in your brokerage that can help you with, making sure that am I doing this right? What should I be looking for here? And making sure that you can get some guidance on this until you get comfortable doing the process yourself.
I'm thinking about our previous conversation. So I got kind of two questions. One will lead into the other. We were talking about the investor and their potential renovation and permits and stuff like that, and mechanics liens. Are you seeing that inside the new construction? I'm going to guess that the big guys, your big national builders, probably own their team. So mechanic liens probably aren't that big of a deal. But maybe in custom or your small regional builders, is that something that is coming across? I'm not going to say often, but like something for somebody to take into consideration, because that can delay closing if their subs aren't getting paid from the builder side. And then leading from that to, I know that title insurance is kind of what protects the buyer from mechanics liens or being built on like an Indian graveyard or, something like that. Like those are the things. Can you explain, I guess, that first piece of mechanics liens from a new construction piece? And then what is title insurance, lender's title insurance and owner's title insurance?
Sure. So the big builder is, without a doubt, they're going to have the mechanics lien agent, usually without fail on that. Depending on the builder, they may or may not have potential lien claimants out there. It's usually they've got their teams that are building that are in-house, but they may have mechanics liens for, was the lumber purchased from a lumber company or something like that. So the framing lumber and all that sort of stuff, or they may have the concrete person is a potential lien claimant. So depending on the circumstance, we may see a few of them there. Your customs, they will tend to sub some of the things out, and we see those, but it's the same process. Normally speaking, a good GC knows about mechanics lien laws. They've got one that's on site in terms of the notice, and those are getting properly filed. So that was a change in law that happened, I think, just about 10 years ago.
Okay.
Took a little bit of time for people to get used to, but everybody has kind of gotten accustomed to that process. So it is a process that we're seeing. Like I said, where we run into issues is where we have more kind of the fix and flip. Is where we're seeing kind of that's not getting done always like it should. So, but it's a solvable problem if they mess up, but it's just one that takes time to solve. So what I typically will say is, uncommon transactions require uncommon solutions,
Right.
and then you just have to account for that. Title insurance. So yeah, title insurance is there. They're there to protect financial loss of both the buyer and the lender in this case. Anytime you take out a loan against the piece of property, generally speaking, unless it's something like a very small HELOC, most lenders are going to require a title insurance policy every single time, a loan policy. The loan policy is not coverage for the owner. The loan policy protects the lender against financial loss in the event of there's an issue with the title to the property. People often get this confused. They're like, oh, you mean homeowner's insurance? And I go, no, this is not homeowner's insurance. This is two different things. The common example that I give is someone shows up at your door, 6 months after you've moved into the house, and they say, I'm the owner of this property. You gotta leave here. What do I do? Where do I go? And the first call is usually going to be to your closing attorney, who's probably going to send you back to the title insurance company.
Okay.
And so what it protects against hidden defects that are against the property. So, if you live in a subdivision, potentially speaking, that was one that, at one time, a 100-acre farm that was owned. And, whenever the farmer passed away, his heirs sold the property. There were 10 heirs that sold the property. Come to find out, there was one other person out there that nobody knew about or accounted for. And now that person's showing up saying that they're entitled to their interest in the property. If it's a valid claim, it's something that title insurance resolves on behalf of the client. So whether it's paying the claim out to the person that says they're the rightful owner, if it's something that title insurance would look at, they could say, we're just going to tender the policy to our insured. Those are kind of options of last resort. Typically speaking, they look to resolve it a different way if possible. Sometimes it's just like something got missed and they're just going to fix it.
So in those situations, that's protecting our collateral from the lender's perspective of making sure that the person that does own the property, the deed of trust, actually has deed and title so that we can have a deed of trust, right?
Correct.
So that's where your lender's loan policy is really coming in to protect the owner of our deed of trust. Because if somebody else is the deed of trust, we don't really have a loan to it.
Correct. So, so the financial loss is suffered by the lender. Basically, the loan they gave out is now not secured by the property. It can be something that protects the lender. For the owner, for them, it's protecting their investment in the property.
Okay.
And so it's a one-time purchase that people make, and it is good for not only while you own the home, but it's actually, people don't realize, it can be good for after you've sold the property, because if there is to be an issue that was found later on that comes through your chain of title, your ownership back to something before you, the title insurance is still there. You paid for the policy, so there's coverage that is there.
So it starts at where you buy the house forward.
It actually starts where you bought the house backwards. The situation I was giving is if something is found in the future and it comes back through your ownership to someone before you, then you find, that's whenever title insurance.
But if you sold the house and it comes back to you,
and it comes back to something
your issue, your owner's policy was retroactive, not proactive.
Right. It doesn't insure going forward.
Interesting.
In terms of so if you were to go and hire a plumber to come onto your property and do work and you don't pay the plumber, title insurance is not going to step in for the mechanic's lien where you didn't pay the plumber. What they would be looking at is if the person that owned the property before you hired the plumber and didn't tell anybody, and now the plumber's filing a claim of lien against the property. Now title insurance is protecting your interest in it.
Now, I have heard, so on our documents, we always say owner's title insurance optional because it's not something that we require as a lender. Now, I have talked to other attorneys and they say, well, I won't close it without owner's title policy. Why is that?
Because it is a huge transaction someone's undertaking and they shouldn't close it without title insurance. The fact of the matter is it's a one-time premium that you pay. And a good closing attorney is they're going to do everything they can to make that cost low. So if we can find a prior policy to get a reissue rate or anything else like that, we're going to do what we can to lower the amount you pay. It is a one-time fee. Typically, if you do a simultaneous issuance of both the lender and the owner's policy, it's not really that much of a difference in terms of price. There really isn't a reason not to do it. But title insurance is there for the client to ensure that, hey, this has been done correctly. Title insurance, the process, the way it works, I'm going to nerd out for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
So the way it works is whenever you go on a contract and purchase a piece of property, or if you're going to do a refinance, we get a request or we get a copy of the contract to do a title exam. And what we do is we examine public records that are sitting out there in connection with the property. And we turn that examination, so that's basically all these documents we pull together, we turn that into an opinion on title that goes to title insurance.
Okay.
Title insurance then basically looks at that opinion and they say, okay, we will agree to insure this property under these conditions.
Okay.
And
are those the endorsements or are those separate?
So the endorsements can be part of the requirements.
Okay.
So typically there's standard endorsements that you'll see on a lender's policy. And again, I'm not going to get to those because I'll nerd out on those.
Yeah, we don't have the time for it.
But it's usually just their added requirements for the title attorney to look at and say, okay, have we met requirements? Because what they'll say is the title insurance company said, we will insure this transaction under the following conditions. In closing attorney, you have to meet items 1 through 15. Okay. And essentially that's a roadmap for the closing attorney. Okay. I have to do 1 through 15. If I don't do 1 through 15, I don't close.
Okay.
And so if you're a real estate agent and you go, or you're a lender, you go, why is the closing attorney asking for this? Understand they are not doing it for fun. It's usually something that's on the title commitment where they're saying, I have to have this in order to be able to close. And so that is kind of the roadmap. So could you close on a piece of property? I think the only way that I would close on a piece of property that didn't have title insurance on it is the client would have to sign some sort of waiver and basically say, I understand the risk. I've been advised by counsel to purchase title insurance. I refuse to accept the advice of counsel, and I'm going to do whatever I want to do and not pay for this.
Right.
And it happens, and now they're just rolling the dice.
Because you're pretty much saying that I find the attorney not culpable for anything that comes up. You're pretty much relinquishing you guys of
they're not going to be able to come back and say, well, I should have purchased title insurance. Okay. Because if I had purchased title insurance, I wouldn't have had this problem. Because real estate problems, they're expensive if you have to go litigate something. They can take years to resolve. It can take tens of thousands of dollars of attorney's fees to resolve. Quite honestly, it's just expensive. It's time consuming. And so if you want to bear the risk, if you want to assume that risk as part of the purchase, you in theory can do that. But for the average consumer, it doesn't make sense. If you're going to pay a one-time fee that's going to provide you with all this coverage, why wouldn't you do it? And just mitigate your risk. Because like I said, God forbid, if something does come up, it's not going to be cheap and it's not going to be something that's taken care of quickly.
Now, one thing I do want to kind of get your opinion on, from what I understand and just helping people understand, they come to us generally as lenders. We're the money people, so we get feed out, right? Like everybody wants to kind of undermine every fee that we possibly have. Is it necessary? From my understanding, lenders' title insurance, or maybe both policies, are highly regulated here in North Carolina for almost like a calculation of this is what it will be. Is that pretty accurate?
That is. So the North Carolina Department of Insurance's rate bureau sets the rates. And so you'll see slight variations depending on the type of policy that's being purchased. So do you have an enhanced policy versus a basic policy? Do you have what endorsements are on there? So certain endorsements may have additional costs that are associated with it. We usually see more endorsements on that are going to have more expenses associated with commercial deals as opposed to residential. So that's dependent. And then what services are being provided by the agency. So It's typically speaking from title insurance company to title insurance company. It's relatively similar. There's not a wild swing one way or the other. So you're not going to have, I would seriously doubt that you would see a company that's, thousands of dollars. It's not $1,000 difference.
Like plus or minus $50, something like
Plus
that.
or minus, $100 somewhere in there. So it's usually what you can expect on something like that.
And I think that that's important for people to understand too, because when they come to us, they'll be like, well, why is the credit report fee like this? Why is the appraisal fee like this? Why is title insurance like this? And we're like, well, none of us that are your partners get to control any of that. Like the appraiser sets the appraisal fee, the credit report, like the credit bureaus set their fees. Title insurance is controlled by insurance here in North Carolina, plus or minus $100. So helping people understand that process too, of like, hey, don't come at us. Like we control like our application fee and discount points. And you guys control like settlement fee and maybe a recording fee or a wire fee. Like, but that's about it. Like we really aren't making or charging that much. The big bulk of costs are homeowners insurance, taxes, and third-party fees that we have no control over.
And homeowners insurance, and this is what I say in terms of if you're comparing rates and title insurance, it's similar to homeowners insurance because you may have somebody go, well, I got quoted this amount from company A and this amount from company B, and there's a few $100 difference. The question is always to go back to what they have provided to you. Are you comparing apples to apples, or are you comparing apples to oranges? Because you may have company B over here who gave you a quote and it's $300-$400 less per year, and then you start looking at the amount of coverage that's provided, and it's significantly less than what's company A. So it becomes a matter of what are you comfortable with, and making sure that you've got sufficient coverage for your home. But also to whenever you're comparing rates, compare apples to apples, and really look at those documents. And I know there's so much going on when you're buying a house, so it can be overwhelming. And I know it can be frustrating, but do make sure that's one of those things, because your homeowner's insurance is going to impact your reserves that's set up for escrows. It's going to impact your closing costs, but it's also going to impact what your monthly payment's going to be as the lender pulls that escrow out every single month. So make sure you're shopping around and make sure too you're working with a company that if you do have an event that happens, so if you've got a fire or something, you've got a company that's there for you, and working with agents that you trust and that have good reputations, I think so.
And I do like to help make sure everybody understands too that like we are a service industry. So like, yes, somebody might be plus or minus $10, $15, $100, but what is that experience like? There's a reason that even though, let's use a Honda Fiesta and a BMW 3 Series can get you to the same place, point A to point B, at the same speed, the speed limit is what we're going to say. The experience in that car is going to be different, but when you take it in for servicing, the service experience is completely night and day. And helping people understand that we're not necessarily saying, yes, we're more expensive than everybody else. A lot of times we're cheaper than a lot of other people, but also making sure you're working with somebody that you're getting the BMW, Ferrari experience and good pricing, or competitive pricing, we'll call it competitive, making sure that we're not commoditizing ourselves. We talk realtors all the time. When the lawsuit came out, remember, you're not a commodity, you're a service. Go out and sell yourself, and then you can still make the money that you guys are making because you are a service and you have value. Making sure that you understand that your partners also are a service, and don't just tell your clients like, hey, go out and price shop everybody to hell and then complain to us, your friends, that says, I just had this crappy deal when they went through bank X or credit union A or this other lender or this other broker. It's like, well, you farmed them out on a commodity instead of on service that you knew that we could provide.
Well, if you're a real estate agent, you're a brand, and that's know your brand, know your value. And then understand the message that you want to communicate. I tell agents all the time, you can spend a ton of money on buying leads. You can spend money on social media advertising. You can buy billboards, whatever the case may be. The number one way to build your pipeline is to have the client get up from the closing table, go, that was incredibly smooth. That was incredibly easy. Even for such a, particularly for first-time home buyers, a nerve-wracking scenario, they made this so easy for me. So understanding too that as a realtor, then the people that you work with are brand extensions of you. And so a lot of times clients come to you and they don't necessarily know where to start for a loan, or they don't know who to talk to in terms of closing attorney or homeowners insurance. They definitely probably don't on a day-to-day basis deal with home inspectors, things of that nature. So the people that you work with are extensions of your brand, and you need to recognize that. So if what you're communicating to the client is, listen, I am a brand that provides value to you and you give back, and if you're an agent, you need to make sure you're communicating to the client of, I'm here to make this experience as positive for you, as smooth for you, as easy for you as possible. And make sure you're partnering with people. Again, not to knock anybody sort of thing, but if you send your client out to go shop their loan out to anybody and everybody, and they may end up with some loan officer out in California or something like that, we get a hold of them if we need something or something happens. You may not be able to. You may be on an assembly line process for them. There may be a time difference for them where you can get a hold of. Whereas if you've got a local lender that you work with and you trust, even from the front end side of it, it can make your life easier because you've got someone who is a partner with you that's local, that's invested in your business. At the same time, as the attorney on the backside, what you don't see is we've now done the closing. So a lot of lenders require what we call funding authorization in order to be able to record or to actually get their funds from them. And I've got someone in the back room that's holding up something because, for whatever reason, and it's something minor, something small that doesn't need to be really an issue. If I know that local loan officer, I can pick the phone and call and say, hey, help me out with your back room here. And usually within 10 minutes, I'm getting funding authorization to get on record. And that's important, like having that relationship to be able to call them up and say, help me out here. I've got somebody in your back room that's holding something up or they're not getting back to me as fast as they should. The loan officer makes the call and it's usually the problem sorted out very quickly. So having that local partner is on the backside. If your client's closing on Friday afternoon sort of thing, they want to get in the house. Chances are they're moving that weekend. And having that partner that's invested with you is important. So recommend you shop local, buy local. Again, not to knock anyone else that is in multiple states and that sort of stuff. But if you've got a local loan officer that you know and trust, value that relationship because it's definitely they're going to invest back into you.
Absolutely. And I like what you said there was like understanding your brand. If you're an agent out there that is, I'm the cheapest agent and that's your pitch, and you have a Rolodex of super cheap lenders that like that are internet lenders that you're going to send them to because of the cheapest price, that's your brand. And that's perfectly okay. One of the things I've learned is to not judge people on their business models, like kind of what you said too. However, if your brand is service or luxury or creative, you need to make sure that your team, which is all of us, your home inspector, your lender, your attorney, radon, your pest guy, like I don't know, like everybody is also matching exactly what you said, the brand that you're portraying to get the deal in the first place.
And set the expectation for the client. If you got someone who is, and look, everybody deserves a shot at the American dream. So if you got a first-time home buyer out there that, they're flipping over every couch cushion for pennies to make their closing costs, that sort of stuff, there's a place in your Rolodex, in terms of if that's your brand of, we're going to find you the cheapest house in terms of what you can afford, that's reasonable, that sort of stuff. We're going to find you the cheapest lender. We're going to find you the cheapest attorney, that sort of stuff. Okay, but make sure you're communicating those expectations to the client. So you're constrained by this, and so this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to make you help you meet your goals. And so understanding that the cheapest one out there, you may not get the most responsive, timely responses from the attorney or from the lender or whatever the case may be. Understand this is going to be a little bit more difficult.
And plan your contract accordingly.
Yes.
Because if you know that you're going the cheapest, they're probably not the fastest.
Correct. Well, and a lot of times too, that'll involve, again, uncommon transactions require uncommon solutions. So, a lot of times you're looking at things like manufactured home that is out in the country somewhere. Not pick on manufactured homes, not pick on rural living, but it's one of those things that manufactured homes are different. They require different requirements, particularly if you're doing like an FHA loan or a USDA loan. There may be specific requirements coming from the lender, and those are things that they just are going to take longer to close. So you can't set the expectation of we're going to close this thing in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, when in reality it's going to take you closer to 6. And so making sure that if you're catering to those clients and you're setting those expectations, making sure you're also communicating with the lender that's involved. How long is it reasonably going to take you to be able to get this through underwriting? What is it going to take? And making sure that contract deadlines are being set that way, because you don't want to run up on the end of the contract and all of a sudden you're having to negotiate an extension with the seller and they're wanting more money, particularly if you've got a client that's cash strapped and you don't want them to have to come up with more money to be able to put down to extend the contract. So I think if
there's so much that goes on behind the scenes for us too, that I think we do a really good job of shielding the consumer from like, hey, did you know that we actually did A through F for you? And they're like, no, we had no idea. Sometimes communicating that up front too, of like, hey, if we go at this house, also understand like manufactured, it's a great starting point for a lot of people, but we're going to need engineer certs. Like any type of loan is going to have very, very specific sets on manufactured and having, like you said, setting expectations. I'm so glad that you came on. I have one last question. It's my favorite question to always ask at the very end. And it's what's the worst advice? So as attorneys, I know that you guys are kind of like, I'm going to say sales like us, where you still have to go out and source your own business. And so you guys have that business aspect as well going to it. So what's that business advice, the worst advice that you were ever given, and how you would mitigate it in your head? Because we all got it. We've all got that terrible advice.
The terrible advice we got. I think the terrible advice, and I don't know if it's necessarily advice, but something particularly early on in career, I think that everybody, I think feels at some point. So whether you're a lender, a realtor, or an attorney, early on, you're trying to make money, and you're chasing every deal. You're chasing every dollar. And getting out of that mindset of have to chase every dollar, every deal. There, it is one of those situations where, depending on, again, knowing who you are, know your brand, know your value, don't chase those dollars. If it looks like a headache, if you get the vibes early on of this is going to be nothing but problems for me, this is a massive time suck for me, be okay with walking away, and saying, you know what, we're not the right fit in terms of, if you normally sell luxury real estate and your service and all that sort of stuff, if you've got someone that's coming to you that is, wanting to and they're strapped for cash and they're, to be able to close and things of that nature, maybe you're not the right fit for them. So recognizing those, and learning how to spot and say, I don't need to chase this one. I would be better off spending my time going after other leads, other prospects, and developing other business as opposed to running this deal down. Because invariably in my practice, I can tell you the cases that I've looked at, and I used to do litigation work, I've done closing work, whether it's litigation, whether it's closings, the cases that I've looked at, and when they come to the door and I went, I don't know if I should take this, have always been the ones that 6 months later, I'm kicking myself going, yeah, I should have listened to my gut on this one. So be okay with that mindset of, I don't need to chase every dollar that's out there. If I hustle and do things right and I set my processes right, things will work themselves out.
That's so great. And for all of you that are listening, this should be a trend that has been said multiple times before. So keep that in mind, that you're having tons of experts inside the field, our field, that are saying, know your brand, and don't chase stuff that's outside of your brand. And so for me personally, that was when I finally sat in. I had that epiphany late last year, finally, of I don't have to be the specialist of every loan. I fit in non-QM. I like land. I like renovation. I like the stuff that nobody else wants to do. And with that, I was able to turn away and be like, I'm not your down payment assistance person. I'm not going to give you the best advice. I'm not going to give you the best service. However, teammate A is really good at that. And being able to have that conversation with the people that you have, the people inside your sphere, and be like, look, this doesn't match. It's not me, is okay. For podcasts prior to this, they've said the exact same thing. Once they finally started to let stuff go, their company actually moved up exponentially because they weren't wasting that time that didn't fit the box.
And if you're a realtor, it's super easy. You farm it out to someone, you get a referral fee, and the client gets taken care of. They get someone that matches what they need a little bit better. Quite honestly, for lenders and that sort of stuff, if you're a realtor, you have those different people in your Rolodex. Having someone that does non-conventional types of loans, you're leaving money on the table potentially with people you do want to work with. If you don't familiarize yourself with these people and kind of understand what the products, you don't need to be able to underwrite a loan to do it, but to know of, hey, I've got somebody who's an unconventional client, but they've got the assets, they should be able to qualify. This is someone I want to work with. Is there a product that's out there, and knowing who to talk to, I think is extremely important. Is it, like I said, more than anything, is can you connect your client with the right person? Because what you want them to do is you want them to hear yes. Hearing no is part of the process for the client can be a death knell because they can get frustrated and stop. So I think that's extremely important. But
yeah, absolutely. You want to be just dangerous enough. So anybody that wants to be, this is my little pitch to you. If you want to be more dangerous in creative financing, look for my book on Amazon. It's the non-QM Edge, a realtor's playbook to closing more deals. It makes you just dangerous enough to get you back to someone like me or other creative financing specialists. So look for it on Amazon. And David, I'm so grateful for you coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
I think this is a wealth of knowledge for anybody that listens. And so I'm so appreciative.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, sir.
All right.